Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Mem Aleph in Shevuot. We are at the two dots, about 10 lines up from the bottom of Mem Amud Bet.
Any
And
famous rabbis today?
we are going to have a number of famous rabbis, Rav Nachman, Rav Papa. We're going to have, I think, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. We'll talk about them as well. But let me share my screen and we will get really started. So we are in the 6th chapter of Shevuot, dealing with oaths imposed by judges. As we've mentioned, there are 3 biblical oaths that are covered by this category. One is partial admission, which has been the focus of most of the chapter. That's where I say you owe me $100. You say, no, I only owe you $50. So because we're concerned that maybe you were saying that you only owe me $50, not because it's not true, not because you don't owe me $100, but because you just have $50 on you. You know you owe me $100, but you don't want to admit to the true amount because you want to give yourself additional time. So therefore, the Torah puts on you an oath to say, hey, you need to be serious about this. You need to know and admit what you owe, and you don't know. This is one of many examples of where we say that the ends do not justify the means. How you do something is incredibly important, and being honest is incredibly important. So that's category number 1. Category number 2 is if I come with Moshe and make a claim against Stan and say he owes me $100, and Moshe confirms and says, I saw Stan borrow the $100, but Moshe's only one person. And so as a result, I don't have 2 witnesses. In that situation, Stan also will make an oath. He'll swear that if he denies it, he'll swear that he doesn't owe it. And that's a biblical oath required by the Torah. Because although I don't have 2 witnesses, I have at least 1 witness. That's enough to make Stan have to swear. And then finally, if I am a watcher of something, if Mark gave me something to watch, and unfortunately it gets lost or stolen or something bad happens to it, and it wasn't my fault, I wasn't negligent, so I have to make an oath to say that I wasn't negligent associated with it. We haven't yet really dealt with that during this chapter, but that's the 3rd category of biblical oaths that we're talking about that are imposed by judges. And so now as we pick up at the 2 dots on the 10th line from the bottom of Mem Amud Bet, the Gemara quotes our Mishnah's rule that when there is no admission, there is no requirement to swear. And the Gemara is going to introduce Shevuot Hesed. That is a rabbinically required oath that one swears if one denies owing anything. And so let's take a look, and we'll have a chance to learn about that. So, if the person responds that he doesn't owe anything, well, then he's exempt. There is no biblical obligation to swear. Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman says on that, and we will see that there's another statement that understood Rav Nachman to be speaking about a different situation, although this is the one that we actually follow. Rav Nachman says, in that situation, we make him swear an oath of Hesses. Now, what is Hesses? We'll go with Rashi's interpretation. There are a number of interpretations that are offered by Rishonim, but Hesses, Lashon Suma. It's a language of placing. Shesamu chachamim alav shua, because the chachamim put on this person an oath. Kamo im Hashem heisischa bi. Right, in Shmuel Aleph, Parakaf Vav, David HaMelech is talking to Shaul and saying, listen, your watchers, why are you trying to kill me? Because Shaul is trying to kill David, and David has taken away his spear and says, listen, your watchers aren't protecting you. So know that I am not trying to kill you, because if I wanted to, I could have. And so as a result, in that context, David says to Shaul, Im Hashem if Hashem has incited you against me, so placed within you an urge against me. So that is the same kind of language of Shavuos Heses, that it deals with sort of putting on somebody something. And so as a result, we're going to deal with, say that this is putting on an oath on somebody. So my time, going back into the Gemara. So now we're one line below the lower set of two dots. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 lines up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7 lines up from the narrow lines. My timer, what's the reason that we're going to put this oath on the person who denies everything? Chazaka eina adam toveya ela im kain yesh lo alav. Because people don't ask for money and say that you owe them money if you don't owe them anything. Right? Do you go around saying to people, no, of course not, because we don't do that. That's not the way people behave. So as a result, therefore, we're going to say that you have to swear. Well, 1 second, the Gemara asks, Adarabba, chazaka ein adam meiz pana bifnei ba'al chobo. But we also have a presumption that people are not so obnoxious as to say that they don't owe anything when they do owe something. If somebody comes to you and you owe them, a pen, or you owe them $100, and they say, listen, can you pay me the $100 that you owe me? You don't say, I don't owe you anything. That would be so obnoxious. You might say, I owe you, but I can't pay you now. But you wouldn't deny the whole thing. So don't we have a presumption going in the other direction? So ashtamute hu dekam mishtamet lei. So maybe the person who's saying that he doesn't know anything is trying to avoid and delay, and therefore that's why he's saying that he doesn't know anything. Savar, he thinks adahavali ufaranalei. Listen, I'm just gonna say I don't owe the guy until I have the money, and then I'll repay him. And so that's what he's going to do. But the problem is that in the meantime, he's saying something that's not true, and that shouldn't happen. And so as a result, in order to prevent that, we make him swear, because when you have to make an oath, it means that it's very serious, and a person isn't going to swear falsely. So Teda, and you should know that in fact, this must be the reason, to Amar of Idi bar Avin, Amar of Chista, that in fact, a person who swears, who denies owing money completely is not treated like an outright liar the way some other people are treated. Because Rav Idi bar Avin says, Hakofer b'milva, if you deny a loan, kosher le'edus, you are still kosher to testify, even if it turns out that you were false, that it turns out that you did actually borrow the money, because we're not going to suspect you of being a thief. But pikadon, but if I give you something to watch and you deny and you say you never gave me anything to watch, well then puzzle le'edus, then you would be disqualified from testifying. As Rashi says, va'afilu 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up in the Rashi, but pikadon puzzle le'edus, va'afilu lo nishba, even if you don't swear that you don't have the item that on deposit, we're going to say that that's bad enough, and you're not going to be able to testify any longer if you say deny falsely. Demasa de kafar, that the act of denial, ichshadle amamona, shows that he's a suspect with respect to monetary issues. Baba Metzia b'perakama mukmele b'da'asus hade. But in Baba Metzia, we clarify that the situation where we would say that the person is no longer a good witness is where there are other witnesses, dahi shaisa, that at that moment that the person was denying that he had the item that I had given him to watch, habe biyade, it was still in his hand. Delega lamemer irkasle. Umishtamit ad debachish umishkach. That don't say that he was saying that he lost the item and as a result was just trying to postpone. that would be similar to the situation of theft. Excuse me, a situation of a loan. In the loan, I'm saying I don't owe you, not because I don't owe you, but because I want to just delay. And so as a result, we're going to allow that person to still testify. But here, when it comes to something that you're watching, if the item was lost and you're saying that I don't have it, there was nothing, that I never took anything from you in order to give yourself additional time, well, then we'll still allow you to be a good witness. But if the witnesses come and say at that moment that the guy was denying it, it was right there in his living room and he hadn't lost it at all, and he knew exactly where it was, well, then that person will no longer be a good witness. Rav Chaviva Masnei Aseifa. Now, I mentioned earlier that we said that there was a different opinion about where Rav Nachman taught his lesson. And so Rav Chaviva says that Rav Nachman's lesson, namely the fact that the person who ordinarily is not going to be required to make a biblical oath, is going to be required to make a rabbinic oath. And that was not on that case, but it was really on a later case in our Mishnah. Mana leviyatcha, where the person says, you owe me $100. Amar lo hein, the person says yes. L'machar amar lo tneuli, and then the next day the lender says, so give me my money, and the borrower says, nisativ lach, I gave it to you an hour and a half ago. So a patur. Then in that situation, the person is exempt because there was no, that's a legitimate claim. He could say that he gave it to him, and maybe he in fact did. But Amar Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman said, Mashbian oso Shevuot Hesses, that specifically in that case, we're going to require a rabbinic oath. Mandat matne aresha, the one who says that in the earlier case where you just deny everything from the very beginning, kol shekain aseifa. Well, then certainly if you initially admitted it and then you later say that you paid it, we're going to make you swear. But as we turn to Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, Uman de Masni La Aseifa, but the one who says that the Rav Nachman's ruling is only where you admit it and then later say that you deny it because you repaid, Haka, that would be the situation there. There, we know that money was involved. We know that money changed hands because the borrower admitted that he had borrowed the money. Aval Hassam, when he has an outright denial, delay Gedrara de Mamona, there is no certain involvement of money. Lo, then maybe he would not be required to swear. So, my ika bein Shevuot de'oraisa l'Shevuot de'Rabbanan. Well, 1 second here. In the end of the day, we're making the debtor swear that there was no loan, and the implication is at the moment that the ramifications of not swearing are the same and the ramifications of swearing are the same. So what's the difference? Is there any practical difference between the oath on somebody who denies everything and somebody who's a moda b'mixus and admits half? So l'shvua d'Rabbanan, so ika benaihu, there is in fact a difference between them. Meipach shvua, the question of reversing an oath, and Rashi tells us what it is. Im amar hanitba, if the defendant, if the person who the claimant is saying owes him money, if he says litoveya to the person who's claiming, hishva v'tol, you swear and you take, well then, is that a possible option or is it not? So b'doraisa lo mabchinan shvua, b'dorabanan mabchinan shvua, that when it comes to a biblical oath, so when somebody denies when somebody is a moda b'mixus, he admits part of the amount. Well, then he can't turn around and say, "Listen, I don't want to swear. You swear, and I'll give it to you." But in the case where a person says, where a person denies the whole thing and says, "I don't owe you anything," then if he says to the claimant, "Listen, I don't want to make this Shevuot Hesses, but if you swear, I'll pay you." Well, then we will reverse the oath, and the claimant, can say, "I swear," and therefore get paid. Umar Baravashi. Well, what about according to Mamar Baravashi, to Amar B'do Raisa Nami Mabchinan Shvua, who says that even when it comes to biblical oaths, we will reverse the oath and allow the defendant to say, plaintiff, you swear and I'll pay you. So my Ika Ben Do Raisa the Rabbanan. So what's the difference? So Ika Benai, there's another difference that we could point to. Mechas Lenichse. The question is what happens if do we allow us to go in to the defendant's property? Bidoro Raisa Nachte Lenichse. Well, then when it's a biblical oath, if the person refuses to swear, well, then we'll go into his property and take it. Bidarabanan, but when it's a rabbinic oath, lo nachtinan lenichse. We're not going to go into his property and swear. But 1 second. Rabbi Yossi. What about according to Rabbi Yossi? That who says that when it comes to even rabbinic oaths, we do go into the defendant's property in order to take it. And how do I know that we will go into a defendant's property when it comes to a rabbinic situation, according to Rabbi Yossi? Ditnan, because listen to the following Mishnah. Now, this Mishnah does not directly apply to an oath situation, but it says that when there's a rabbinic theft, we will go in, according to Rabbi Yossi, and take the property away from the person who stole it, even though, according to the Torah, it isn't theft. So according to the rabbis, in that situation, we don't take it away. So what's the situation? Ditanan, mitzias cheirish shota v'katan. If a deaf mute, a person who's insane, or a katan, a minor, finds something, yesh bahem gazel. If you take it away, it's like you stole it. Mipnei darkei shalom, because of the ways of peace, meaning it's not biblically theft, but we don't want people to see a kid find a dollar bill and then you take it away from them, right? That doesn't sound right. No, that would be wrong. But Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says gezel gomer. It's real theft. It's not just some kind of theft. It's real theft. But Amar Rav Chisda, and Rav Chisda says gezel gomer midivrehen. When Rabbi Yossi says that it's real theft, he doesn't mean that it's real theft from a biblical perspective, because everybody agrees that it's not real theft, because these people can't take ownership of something. But it is real theft from the rabbinic perspective. And what does that mean? L'may nakamina, what difference does it make? L'hotzia b'danyanin. The judges will take it away from the quote-unquote thief's possession, because even though he's not a biblical thief, according to Rabbi Yossi, he is sufficiently a thief that, and even though it's only rabbinic, we're going to take it away. So my ika bendo raisel de rabbanan. So based on Rabbi Yossi, what's the difference between the biblical oath and a rabbinic oath? Because even a rabbinic oath, if you fail to take it, presumably Rabbi Yossi would say, we'll go into your property and take it away. So ika benayu shekenegdo chashud al hashvua. No, well, what about the following situation? And essentially, in all three of these cases, we actually will hold of all three of these differences. So the third difference is what happens when the defendant is we suspect that he is not going to swear honestly, because we know that he has sworn falsely before. And so as a result, when in that situation, when it comes to a biblical oath, bid oraisa shekenegdo chashad al shvua afchinan le shvua. When the person is suspected with respect to oaths, we will reverse the oath and allow the plaintiff to swear and to take the samu aidach, and we put it on the other litigant. Bid rabbanan, but when it comes to a rabbinic oath, takantehi. The Shevuot Heses is just a rabbinic enactment. V'takanta l'takanta lo avdinan, and we're not going to put one rabbinic enactment on another, right? So the Shevuot of Heses is itself a rabbinic enactment, and so is the flipping. So what ends up happening? So Rashi tells us that in this situation, because we don't flip the oath, if somebody is a suspect with respect to oaths, and he denies outright owing anything, well, then the end result is that the person can't collect, the plaintiff can't collect. Okay. Now, according to the rabbis who say that we don't go into a thief's somebody who steals from a katan shota and cherish katan cherish shota v'katan, that we don't go into their. I'm sorry, that somebody who steals from them, we don't go into that thief's property to take away the stolen object. Who says that we don't go into the property to get the object. What do we do? Meaning, if let's say again, so Ruvain says to Shimon, you owe me $100. Shimon says, I don't owe you anything. And then, so the court says to Shimon, listen, you have to swear. Shimon says, no, I'm not going to swear. So now what happens? Do we just do nothing? So much tamina, like, we will excommunicate him. So Amarle Ravina Ravashi, Ravina says 1 second, that can't be what you do. Hanakte Bakuvse, you're grabbing him by the privates. Vinishbekela Glimehu, and then you're taking his clothing, meaning a full-fledged excommunication is such a punishment that it is effectively like it is like going into his property and taking the item. Elamai Abdinale. So what could we do to him? So Amarle, Mishtaminan le Adamati Zman Nagde. No, we excommunicate him for 30 days, Rashi explains, until the time for giving him lashes. Vinagdinan le, and then we'll give him lashes. And if after all that he still does not says that he's not going to then vishavkinale, we're going to leave him be, meaning that if Reuven again claims from Shimon that he owes him $100, Shimon says, I don't owe you anything, but I refuse to swear, so we're going to first excommunicate Shimon for 30 days, then we're going to give Shimon lashes, and if he survives all of that and does not admit to owing the money and refuses to continue to swear, so then we're going to say that's enough, we've punished him enough, and he doesn't owe any further money. Okay, so Amar Papa, excuse me. Haiman de apik shtara al chavre v'amarle shtara paruahu. So what happens if somebody says, Reuven says to Shimon, you owe me $100, and here's the document that shows that you owe me $100, and Shimon says back, that document is a paid document. I already paid that debt. So Amrina lay, we say to him, Lav kol kaminech, you're not believed. Zdil shalem, you have to go pay, because the bottom line is if somebody has an IOU from you and you pay back that IOU, you need to get back the IOU, because otherwise the person can claim it again. So you need to rip it up. You need to make sure that that's no longer in existence. V'im amar li shtabali, but if the defendant says, listen, I say that I paid it, but if you swear that I still owe it, I'll pay you. Amrina lay, we tell the plaintiff, ishtabale, you should swear also. So this is another kind of rabbinic oath. This is a rabbinic oath where the person swears and gets to take. So Amrle Rav Acha Braid the Rav Ashi, Uma ben zel pogim zeshtaro. Well, what's the difference between this and a case where there's a problem in the contract? Because we'll do this outside, in Ksuvos, there's a situation where a woman admits that part of her ketubah was paid. And so as a result, she's still holding the ketubah, which says the full amount in it. And so, but she admits that part of it was paid. And so as a result, it cannot be used to claim the full amount anymore. And so as a result, we're going to say that she needs to swear as to how much she is still owed, because the husband is saying, I paid the whole thing. And so since she still has an element of the claim, because if the husband really did pay the whole thing, he should have gotten the ketubah away from her and had it destroyed. But here, or gotten a receipt, but he doesn't have that. And so here we're going to allow her to swear. So what's the difference between our case, where we have a plaintiff swear and collect, and that case where we have a plaintiff swear and collect? So Amrle, Rav Ashi says back to Rabacha, Hasam, Aval Gabdelo Ta'in Ihu. There, even though the woman did, even though the husband did not ask for the woman to swear, ta'ina le'anan, we're going to tell her to swear because she has admitted that the document she has is imperfect. And therefore, we're going to make her swear no matter what. But hacha, here where the plaintiff does not have any problems, where there's no apparent problems with the document because the plaintiff is not saying that part of the amount was paid off. Amrinan le, we say to the debtor, zil shalim le, go pay him. The itan va'amar ishtabali, but if the debtor says, I want the creditor to swear, well then amrinan le zil ishtabali. Then we'll tell the plaintiff, the creditor, that you should swear. V'tzorba mirabanan, and if the plaintiff is actually a Torah scholar, lo mashbe'inan le, we're not going to make him swear. So Amar le Rav Yemar le Rav Ashi Sorva Mirabanan Mashlach Glima de Inshi. Are we going to allow Torah scholars to strip people of their coats? Meaning that here the person says, "I don't owe you anything," and I say that you owe me everything, and we'll say I'm a Torah scholar, and as a result, I'm going to be automatically the winner. That doesn't make any sense. So Ella lo mizdakinan le. No, we're going to say we're not going to get involved, meaning that if the defendant says to me that you should swear, so then if I choose not to swear because I'm a Talmud Chacham and I don't want to be mochel on my kavod, well then I will I'm not going to be able to collect. So as a result, that's the explanation for our situation. And so we have the following: if in an ordinary case, if Reuven claims from Shimon $100, Shimon denies it and says to Reuven to swear. If Reuven doesn't swear, nothing happens. And in the ordinary case, and the same thing will be true if Reuven is a Talmud Chacham. But in both of those cases, he has the ability to swear and collect. Okay. So Manalibiyah. So now we have the next line in our Gemara. Second, I realize that I haven't been scrolling. My apologies. So the Gemara now discusses, one second, hold on, we did that also. I apologize. So our Mishnah noted that if someone admits that he owes a debt, the creditor can say to the debtor that the debtor should only pay back in front of witnesses. So the Gemara discusses a related ruling and uses our Mishnah to question it. So, Manali biyadcha, again, if I say you owe me $100, you say, yes, I do. I say to you, okay, well, only pay me back in front of witnesses. And then if you don't pay me back in front of witnesses, so then we're not going to believe you when you say that you paid me back. So Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Ashi, Hamal ve'eskaveru be'edim, if I loan to somebody money with witnesses, he has to repay with witnesses, because the fact that I used witnesses in the first place shows that I want you to pay back with witnesses. When this teaching was said in front of Shmuel, Amar Li, the person Shmuel said back to me, Yochel Omar Lo, the borrower can say, Paraticha bifnei ploni uploni. Nah, v'holchu lahem medina sayam. I repaid you in front of X and Y. I in front of to these other two people, and they went overseas. And because I can make that claim, we're going to effectively say, amigu, that therefore I would be able to deny owing you completely. So Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah. So now we're going to question that based on our Mishnah. Manali biyadcha, you have $100. Amar lohain, and the person says, yes, I do. Lamakar amar lo taneuli, and then the person says the next day, give it to me. Nesativ loch, and I say, I gave it to you. Patur, the person is exempt. And so what do we see from that? So Rashi says, Nasativ loch patur. Af mishvua, you're not only you're not liable to give him the money, but you don't even have to give an oath, because you're not going to you aren't being modem mixus. Although Rashi then says third to last line, umiu shvuas heses ika. There is a oath, a rabbinic oath that would still be required. But now here in this Mishnah, Kevan, back in the Gemara, we are 1, 2, the last line of the Gemara, second word on the line. V'hahacha kevan detave be'edim, since the claim was made in front of witnesses, command osve be'edim dami, we should treat that as if the money originally was given with witnesses. Meaning, when I say to when Reuben says to Shimon, "You owe me $100," and Shimon says yes, that must have been in front of witnesses, because if it wasn't in front of witnesses, we wouldn't care about it, because we wouldn't be able to prove the Reuben would not be able to prove that Shimon in fact said it. And so as a result, shouldn't we treat the admission in front of witnesses just like it was being given in front of witnesses? And we say in our Mishnah that you're exempt, and yet according to Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav Asi, you're going to be liable. So doesn't this undermine Rav Asi's point? To Yuvta de Rav Asi, as we turn to Mem Aleph Amabet, Amar Lach Rav Asi. Rav Asi would say back to you, no, Anna ki heka demiikara osfe Anna ki amri. When do I say my ruling? Heka demiikara osfe be'edim. Only when it was given initially. Delolidi de hemine, because it shows that I didn't trust him. And now I did trust the guy originally. Now it's too late. So as a result, that's the situation. So Rabbi Yosef, Masni Haki. Rabbi Yosef taught this lesson of Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav Asi, not the way we just learned it, but slightly differently. Not the fact that it's not as saying that that when you loan in front of witnesses, you have to repay in front of witnesses, but slightly differently. Let's see what it says. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Asi, Hamalbes Chaveru be'edim. If you lend in front of witnesses, Eino tzarach leparo be'edim. You do not need to pay back in front of witnesses. But the im amar al tifraeni ela be'edim. But if the lender says you have to pay and verbalizes it at the time of the loan and says you have to repay me in front of witnesses, then you have to pay him in front of witnesses. Ki amrita kamei de Shmuel, and when this was said in front of Shmuel, Amarli, he said to me, Yachal Omar, even in that case, the person can say back, I gave you back the money in front of X and Y, but they went overseas. So Tanan, so now we're going to ask again a question from our Mishnah. So and say, hey, doesn't our Mishnah contradict Shmuel? Because our Shmuel says that you can you can make the claim that I paid in front of A and B, and therefore, or X and Y, and they went overseas, and therefore the borrower won't have to repay. But Tanan, Manali biyadcha, if a person says in our Mishnah, we said that if Reuben says you owe me $100, and Amar lo hain, and then Shimon says back yes, Amar lo al titneu b'li ela b'fnei edim, and Reuben says you can only pay me back in front of witnesses. L'machar Amar lo tneuli, and then Reuben says the next day, okay, so give me my money. Nisativ lach, and Shimon says back, I gave it to you. Chayev. He's still obligated to pay because he needs to give it in front of Edim. So to Yuvta de Shmuel, this undermines Shmuel, because Shmuel seemed to be saying that even if that we will believe a borrower who says that he paid the debt in front of two witnesses who left overseas. And here this seems to be that you have to be able to that Shimon would need to be able to bring the witnesses to court. So Amar Lach Shmuel would say, Tanaihi, no, it's a debate among Tanaim. The Tanya, Be'edim Hilbesicha, if I say to you, I lent you with money, Be'edim Parali, and with witnesses you need to pay back to me. Oh, Yitain. So then the two choices that a borrower has is either give the money when the person claims it, or Yovi Raya the Shanasan, or you have to bring proof. Meaning that's the way we understand our Mishnah, because if Shimon doesn't bring the two witnesses before whom he gave back the money, he's going to have to repay Ruvain all over again. But Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, Yachar lo Marlo. No, the borrower can say, Pratika b'fnei ploni ploni, I gave you back the money in front of A and B, and then they went overseas. So that latter opinion, Rav Yehuda ben Beseira, that's the one that Shmuel agrees with. So Parach Rav Acha says, no, this is not a good proof that in fact Shmuel's understanding is accurate. We cannot in fact prove that there's a machlokas tanaim here because mimayde b'shas halvakai. How do you know that that baraisa is talking about the time of the loan? Dilma b'shas tivoia. Maybe it's talking about the time that the lender is going to get the payment. And this is what he's saying. Didn't I lend you the money in the past in front of witnesses? And so as a result, you're supposed to pay me in front of witnesses now. But if in fact, and that's where there will be this debate, according to the first opinion, that you have to pay back and you have to pay back in front of witnesses. And in the second opinion, no, you don't have to necessarily have the proof in front of you. You can just note the fact that you did do it in front of two witnesses, but they went overseas. So about b'shas halva, but if in fact the stipulation was explicitly made at the time of the loan, well then divrei hakol chayav, then everybody would say that you have to be able to prove that you gave it back in front of witnesses. So as a result, we cannot definitively prove that Shmuel's ruling is supported by this brisa. Nonetheless, we now bring rulings. So Amar Rav Papi Mishmei de Rava. Rav Papi said in the name of Rava, the hilchasa, the halacha is hamal ve'eschavero be'edim tzarich leparo be'edim. If you lend money in front of witnesses, you have to pay back in front of witnesses. But that's not the way we paskin, because the Rav Papa Mishmei de Rava Amar, Rav Papa says in the name of Rava, hamal ve'eschavero be'edim ein tzarich leparo be'edim. You don't need to pay back in front of witnesses. Ve'im Amar, on the other hand, if the lender says to the borrower, Al tifra'eni ela be'edim, but you have to pay me back in front of witnesses, tzarich leparo be'edim, then you do have to pay back in front of witnesses. Ve'im Amar lo, but if the borrower says back to the lender, Paratika b'fnei ploni uploni, I did pay you in front of witnesses. I paid you in front of A and B. But then they went overseas. Naaman, he's believed. And so, interesting, by the way, although our Gemara says Naaman, if you take a look at the Masorah Shas, major change that it appears that the Rambam Naaman. So very big difference, but beyond the scope of our going into now. But the bottom line is that at least from the appearance of our Gemara, it seems like we are paskening like the second view of the way Rav Masni learned Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav Asi. Namely, that again, and this everybody agrees with, if you lend money with witnesses, that does not mean that the borrower needs to pay back with witnesses. But if the lender says the borrower needs to pay back with witnesses, then you do need to pay back with witnesses. Wow. As to whether or not, if the borrower then says, I did pay back with witnesses, I paid back in front of Levi and Yehuda, but Levi and Yehuda went overseas, and so I don't have them to bring to court anymore. Whether or not we believe them, that is a debate among the Rishonim based on what the girsa is in our Gemara. So now we're going to have, sorry for not scrolling.
Okay, so
now we're going to have a variety of rulings, 8 rulings on the issue of repayment. I'm sorry. Now we're going to have 8 related rulings, 4 of which we'll cover now, and the other 4 will occupy the first part of the day tomorrow. So let's take a look at these 4 rulings for today. So Reuven, the Shimon, Siman. So here, this is the sign of them. You'll see that there are 8. Reuven, B'Shimon, the Tanu, Hilchasa, Yazve, Ufara, Ploni, Uploni, Atzve, Sitrae, Behemnusa, Kivetre. So all those are different kinds of signs to our situations. Sahuda Amrle Lechavre, a person says to his friend, Kifaritinan Parinli Ba'ape Ruvain or Shimon. So that's the Ruvain and Shimon that we mentioned. You have to pay me in front of when I'm lending you money, but you have to pay me back in front of specifically Ruvain and Shimon. But in the end, the borrower paid back in front of 2 other people. And Rashi says Azal pare ba'ape sade achrine v'zeh omer edi shekerheim. And now the lender says that those witnesses are lying. So Amar Abaye, ba'ape betrei Amar like, listen, in the end, the lender said to the borrower to pay in front of two witnesses. Ba'ape betrei pari, and he did pay him back in front of two witnesses, just not the people that were said. So as a result, it's sufficiently covering the requirement. So Amarle Rava said to him, Lahacha ka Amarle ba'ape Ruvain of Shimon. 1 second. It was for this very reason that he said that you had to pay back in front of Reuben and Shimon. Because he didn't want the borrower to push him off. And so as a result, the borrower is not exempt from having to pay back when he pays back not in front of Reuben and Shimon. And so as a result, you would need to pay back in front of Reuben and Shimon. So Ahuda Amar Lalachabri, a similar case. So in that case, it seems like that you have to pay. If I say to you that you need to pay back in front of Reuben and Shimon, you need to pay back in front of Reuben and Shimon. So Ahuda Amar Lechavri, if a person says to somebody, the borrower says to, lender says to the borrower, Kifaratli, when you pay me back, Parinli ba'ape betrei detanu hilcha. So you gotta use two witnesses who are Talmidei Chachamim. Azal pare ben delay udelay. In the end, though, the guy paid him back without any witnesses. It nisu hanach zuze. And the recipient, the lender, lost the money. Wow. The lightning came down and struck the money, burning it all up. And as a result, the money went away. So now what does the lender claim? Asala kamei de Rav Nachman. He comes in front of Rav Nachman and Amarle, and he says, I admit that the borrower gave me back the money, but but I only took it to watch over it. I only took it as a watcher because he did not pay me the money in front of two chachamim. And so as a result, I said to myself, this is going to just be a deposit. Until I get two witnesses who come and know how to teach Mishnah and know how to teach Halacha, umakayim tanaye, and then the borrower will fulfill his requirement, and then I won't be a shomer any longer. Then he'll have repaid me. Wow. So Amarle, so Rav Nachman says back to him, Kevan de kamodis de vade shekaltin hulmine. Since you admit that you took the money from him, perel on ma'al yahavi, it's a valid repayment. As Rashi says, Kaven de Kamodis, de Kabbalasinu, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 lines down in the narrow lines on Mem Aleph on Bet, de Kabbalasinu, that you accepted it. Vizel lo b'Torah's pikadon, you didn't accept it explicitly as a deposit. Misaris lecha, and he didn't give it to you as a deposit. Misaris lecha havi piron. It's a full-fledged repayment. Udvarim shahaya belibcha ain't advarim. What you said to yourself that you wanted to treat it as a deposit, that was yourself speaking. You did not express that publicly to the creditor, to the debtor, excuse me. And so as a result, when he paid you back, he was paying you back in full, and it was a full-fledged payment. And if you want to say you want to get the stipulation fulfilled, so zilai sininu, go get the money that burned up, and the ha'ana v'Rav Sheshes, and I and Rav Sheshes, the tanina hilchas of v'sifra v'sifrei v'sosefta v'chulal gemara, we can be your witnesses. Tosos points out, third to last Tosos on the daf. He was joking. I mean, the meaning he was being on some level sarcastic or ironic. To come a haderle, it was how he was responding to him. The labishum to tzarich to know. There is no obligation to fulfill the tanai because the person himself admits that he got back the money. Okay, that's ruling number 2. Ruling number 3. Hahuda amrle lechabre. A person says to his friend, "Havli me'azuze the ozifitkach." Give me the $100 that I lent you. Amarle lo hayudvar ma'olam. It never happened. I don't know what you're talking about. This was never anything that happened in the world. Azal isisade. So now the lender goes and brings witnesses to osei ufare that says that the guy did give him the money, but the witnesses say that the guy paid back. Wow. So now what do we do? Because we have, on the one hand, the borrower says, I don't know what you're talking about. I never did anything with you. But then we have witnesses that say that the borrower definitely borrowed the money and repaid the money. So how do we view it? So Amar Abaye says, my nevod, what are we going to do? Inu Amre Ozfe, Inu Amre Pare. The same witnesses who say that you borrowed say you also paid. And so as a result, according to Abaye, you don't have to pay anything. But Abaye is disputed. Rava says the following: Kol ha'omer lo lavisi, ka'omer lo parati dami. If you say that you didn't pay, then it's as if you say you didn't borrow, it's as if you say you didn't pay. And so as a result, Rashi makes clear, ka'omer lo parati dami, about halfway down in the Rashi in the narrow lines, to kaven de lo lova lefi diburo. Since, according to his words, there was never a loan, lo para, it was never repaid. V'hari yesh edim shel lova ne'emanin. And so now that we have witnesses that are believed, ne'emanim heim al halva, they are going to be believed about the loan. Ve'ena ne'emanim al piron, and we won't believe them about the repayment. Dehodas baldin k'mei edim, because we say that the admission of a party is against interest is as if there were 100 witnesses, and so as a result, we will just accept the witnesses saying that they repaid, saying that there was a loan, and we won't accept the witnesses that there was no repayment. Now, Tosfos asks a great question. Why don't we try and fit his words in and say that when he says that there was never anything going on, really it was not, he means that I paid back. And the answer is because he didn't just say there's no loan. He said there was never anything. And never anything is a step beyond that. And so as a result, in that situation, we won't try to fit his words into the actual facts. So item number 4, and with that we'll conclude. Hahuda Amrle Lechavre, a person says to his friend, Havli me zuze demasikna levach, give me the 100 zuz that I owe you. Amrle lo praticha bifnei ploni uploni. Didn't I already pay you back before A and B? Asu ploni uploni amre, and then A and B come lo hayu dvarim olam, and they say it never happened. So some Rav Sheshes Lamemer Huchza Kafran. Maybe Rav Sheshes said we should say that this person has denied the a loan incorrectly, is now a confirmed liar, and therefore should have to repay. So Amrle Rava finally rules for a defendant. Kol milsa de lo ramyo ale the inish lava daite. Anytime that there isn't some obligation for somebody to remember something, we aren't going to put on him the requirement to remember. And because this loan did not require repayment in front of witnesses, just because the borrower says that I paid in front of A and B, if it doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't repay if A and B say that that never happened. As Rashi says, Kigom Kol milsa de lo rami alev de inish kagon zeh, like this case shelo hayalo lomar paraticha be'edim. The lender never said that you need to pay with witnesses. He didn't need to say that he paid with witnesses. The borrower did not need to say that he paid with witnesses. Shelo amarlo zeh b'shas halva, because he was not told this at the time of the loan. Be'edim parali, that you need to pay back with witnesses. Hilkach lo Sam libo lizkor im be'edim para im shelo be'edim. And so therefore he didn't pay attention to whether he gave with witnesses, and he just misremembered. V'amar be'edim paraticha v'lavadaite ve'eno huksa kafran b'kach. And as a result, he's not a confirmed liar. We will just treat this as a simple denial, and as a result, he will not necessarily have to pay, but of course, he may have to swear a Shevuot Heses. So with that, we are halfway through the Gemara's review of 8 cases, but for the other half, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful day. Okay, let me turn it off, and then we can talk. Hold on. Have a great day, everybody.